Imagine you are suspended at 27,000 feet in the freezing stratosphere, enveloped in a deadly chill of -60 degrees Fahrenheit. But the bone-piercing cold is the least of your nightmares. The American B-17 Flying Fortress bomber you are piloting has been transformed into a shattered flying tomb. The nose of the aircraft has been entirely obliterated by an anti-aircraft shell, and a sub-zero hurricane, blowing at 150 miles per hour and carrying razor-sharp, ice-and-jagged steel shrapnel, is violently roaring into the cockpit. Your comrades are bleeding out, and the moment their blood hits the freezing air, it solidifies into terrifying, dark red icicles. One of your 4 massive engines is completely dead, another is overspeeding so wildly it threatens to tear the wing apart, and the entire fuselage is shuddering like a dying leaf in a gale on the verge of disintegrating in mid-air. Just as you peer out of your shattered window in utter despair, an even more chilling sight materializes: a German B-1 fighter plane. Its fuselage, painted with the stark, terrifying black cross of the Luftwaffe, is hovering like the Grim Reaper just 20 feet from your wingtip. The dark, hollow muzzle of its cannon is aimed directly at your cockpit. Behind the controls of that German fighter sits a cold-eyed, battle-hardened ace. If he applies even a single ounce of pressure to the trigger within a fraction of a second, hundreds of 20mm high-explosive incendiary rounds will reduce you and your crippled bomber to a cloud of metallic dust. For this German pilot, shooting you down means securing the final kill. He needs to earn the ultimate glory. Every German soldier dreams of the Knight's Cross, of the Iron Cross. Hovering on the absolute brink of death, you close your eyes, bracing for the final judgment. However, the deafening roar of the cannons never comes. When you open your eyes again, you witness the most unimaginable, physics-defying miracle in the history of human warfare. The cold-blooded killer who was supposed to send you to hell doesn't fire. Instead, acting as a guardian, an angel, he carefully escorts your defenseless, battered aircraft straight through the lethal gauntlet of the German anti-aircraft defenses. And then, at the final moment of parting, across a few feet of empty sky, he raises his hand and gives you a solemn, respectful military salute. Why? Why would an ace fighter pilot, his hands already stained with the blood of countless enemies, suddenly drop his weapon at the exact moment of a guaranteed kill? And why would these 2 young men, who were supposed to tear each other apart in the freezing skies, embrace tightly half a century later, calling each other brother with tears streaming down their faces? Today, let us pierce through the heavy smoke and fog of history, travel back to the brutal, meat-grinder winter of 1943 in the skies over Europe, and immerse ourselves in a profound miracle that was locked away as a top military secret for nearly half a century, a miracle that transcends national borders, blood feuds, and even life and death itself. The clock winds back to the early morning of December 20th, 1943, during the most grueling and desperate winter of the European theater in World War II. At a secretive United States Air Force base nestled in the rolling hills of England, the thick morning fog has yet to lift. The pungent, metallic stench of aviation fuel, engine oil, and cold gunmetal saturates the tarmac. 21-year-old American Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown sits pale-faced, his palms sweating as he grips the yoke of his B-17F bomber. This is the very first combat mission of his life. His young heart pounds against his ribs like a war drum, feeling as though it might burst from his chest. This massive beast of the sky, affectionately, unhopefully named the Olde Pub by its crew, is a genuine instrument of destruction, its bomb bay packed with exactly 6,000 pounds of high, explosive aviation bombs. Inside its aluminum shell are 10 young, green crew members who are about to face a merciless fate. During the suffocating tense pre-flight briefing at dawn, an intelligence officer, speaking in a voice completely devoid of warmth, traces a red line across a massive map. Their target is the heavily fortified Focke-Wulf fighter manufacturing plant on the outskirts of Bremen, Germany. The officer doesn't even bother to look these young men in the eye as he delivers his chilling warning. You are flying straight into the center of hell, into the densest anti-aircraft flak network in all of Europe. And worse, hundreds of ravenous German F-109 and Def-W-109 and Def-W-190 fighters are waiting to tear you limb from limb. But he intentionally omits one fatal detail. Charlie Brown's Olde Pub, being flown by a rookie crew, has been assigned to the outermost, lowest, and most vulnerable edge of the massive bomber formation, a dead zone quietly and dreadfully referred to by veteran pilots as Purple Heart Corner. In this isolated corner, resembling a lone sheep dangled before a wolf pack, defensive firepower is at its weakest. Blind spots are massive, and you cannot rely on the overlapping, heavy machine gun fire of the rest of the armada. In every single dogfight, the German fighter swarms brutally slice into the allied formations, starting directly at Purple Heart Corner. Flying in this slot means you already have 1 foot in the grave. As a green flare pierces the gloomy sky, the massive right cyclone engines of Olde Pub erupt into a deafening roar, spitting blue flames as the heavy aircraft violently tears itself from gravity's grip and climbs into the clouds. The temperature inside the unpressurized cabin plummets as they ascend. By the time they agonizingly reach their designated altitude of 27,000 feet, the world outside has become a -60-degree death trap. Just as they approach the skies over Bremen, and the bomb bay doors begin to slowly grind open with the shriek of hydraulics, the gates of hell fly open with them. The German 88mm anti-aircraft batteries unleash a frantic, coordinated barrage, instantly blooming deadly, black clouds of smoke across the sky. Every single dark blossom is packed with thousands of razor-sharp, white-hot fragments traveling at supersonic speeds. Suddenly, with an eardrum-shattering explosion, Olde Pub violently bucks, as if slapped by the invisible, massive hand of God. A 20-pound flak shell detonates with terrifying precision directly in front of the cockpit. The massive shockwave instantly shatters the thick plexiglass nose into thousands of lethal, icy projectiles that tear through the cabin. A 150-mile-per-hour sub-zero hurricane immediately floods the once sealed fuselage. The navigator and bombardier take the brunt of it, thrown backward as blood and freezing winds swirl through the interior. But this is only the prelude to the nightmare. Seconds later, engine number 2 on the left wing is completely severed by a massive chunk of shrapnel. With a horrific screech of grinding metal, its propeller grinds to a lifeless halt. Immediately after the control systems for engine number 4 on the right wing are blown apart, the tachometer needle violently redlines, the engine screams in agony, threatening to explode and tear the wing completely off. To save his ship, Charlie Brown has no choice, clenching his jaw of ains popping in his hands. He forcefully throttles back. Losing half its power, Olde Pub rapidly decelerates, acting like a crippled goose helplessly watching the colossal river of Allied bombers fly off into the distance. In the dead silence of the stratosphere, everyone knows the golden rule: to fall out of formation is an absolute death sentence. Scarcely 15 seconds after they drop back, a dozen black shadows as swift as lightning dive out of the cloud cover above. It is an elite Luftwaffe interceptor squadron, a terrifying mix of F-109 and Focke-Wulf 190 fighters. These German veterans, smelling blood, break formation and dive from every angle, mercilessly pouncing on the isolated bomber. This is not a battle of equals, it is a horrific, one-sided slaughter, a cruel game of cat and mouse. The firefight explodes into white-hot chaos filled with the roar of machine guns, the sound of bullets staring through aluminum, skin, and violent explosions. The gunners of Olde Pub, gripped by primal terror, fire back frantically, their tracer rounds weaving a desperate web of fire. But the German fighters, agile as swallows, effortlessly dance through the defensive net, continuously spitting deadly fire. 20mm cannon shells smash into the bomber's massive fuselage like a rain of sledgehammers. Every single detonation violently rips a massive, jagged, bloody hole in the fragile aluminum skin of the trembling aircraft. Engine number 3 takes a direct hit, spewing thick black smoke, further cutting their power. The hydraulic lines controlling pitch and roll are shredded, and reed hydraulic fluid geysers out, like arterial blood freezing instantly in the cold. Complex electrical system completely shorts out, plunging the interior of the bomber into absolute darkness and despair. But the most devastating blow lands at the rear of the plane, the very core of a bomber's defense. Several German fighters, utilizing their superior speed, sweep into the unprotected rear blind spot and begin firing at point-blank range. Concentrated cannon fire mercilessly shreds the tail turret, obliterating its bulletproof glass. 20-year-old tail gunner Sergeant Hugh Eckenrode, still desperately squeezing his triggers to protect his brothers, takes a direct hit to the chest. He is killed instantly, his blood painting the cramped confines of the tail section. The interior of the plane becomes a literal slaughterhouse, echoing with agonizing groans and desperate screams. Of the 10 crew members aboard the crippled flying fortress, nearly all of them are grievously wounded in the chaotic crossfire. A chunk of high-speed shrapnel bites viciously into Charlie Brown's own right shoulder, tearing his heavy flight jacket. The searing pain sweeps through his arm, making it nearly impossible for him to grip the heavy control yoke. In the -60-degree temperatures, the disaster compounds. The lubricating oil inside their defensive machine guns freezes into a rock-solid gel, jamming the bolts. Out of 11 heavy machine guns, only 3 can fire in pathetic bursts. They have completely lost the ability to defend themselves against the relentless attacks. Yet the Grim Reaper's Scythe has not finished swinging. Amidst the intense barrage, the main lines of the aircraft's life-sustaining oxygen system are severed. In the thin atmosphere of the stratosphere, oxygen deprivation is a silent killer. Without a supply of pure oxygen, a human brain under extreme terror and adrenaline cannot survive for more than a few minutes. Hypoxia wraps around the crew like a cold, venomous snake. Charlie Brown feels his breathing grow frantic, a massive weight crushing his chest as the invisible terror begins to systematically shut down his desperate body. Huge black spots bloom in his vision, and the chaotic sounds of gunfire and howling wind become muffled, as if he is sinking deep underwater. He looks down at his own hands and realizes he can no longer feel them gripping the control wheel. His brain begins to hallucinate, his consciousness slowly detaching from his physical body. Finally, an endless darkness completely swallows him. Charlie Brown slumps in his seat, completely unconscious as the sky roars around him. The massive steel leviathan of Ye Olde Pub, having lost its master, immediately bucks like a wild, untamed horse and enters a fatal, uncontrolled death spiral. The nose pitches violently downward, plummeting toward the dark abyss of the German landscape. The airspeed indicator shatters past its design limit of 300 miles per hour. The wind screams through the massive holes in the fuselage, and the entire metal skeleton of the aircraft twists under the immense aerodynamic drag. Just when it seems fate has sealed their doom, and the Reaper is opening his arms to embrace them, an impossible miracle violently intervenes. Because of their catastrophic freefall, they plunge directly into the thick, oxygen-rich lower atmosphere. At the heart-stopping altitude of barely 1,000 feet above the ground, a rush of life-giving oxygen forcefully floods Charlie Brown's lungs. He gasps massively like a drowning man breaking the surface and miraculously regains consciousness. The moment his eyes snap open, his entire field of vision is filled with the rapidly expanding, dark green canopy of a German pine forest. Death is mere seconds away. Driven by sheer pilot instinct, Charlie throws every last ounce of his remaining strength into hauling back the heavy yoke. Amidst a terrifying, screeching groan of overstressed metal, the ruined belly of Ye Olde Pub grazes the very tops of the German pines, snapping off high branches before horrificously leveling out. Gasping for air, Charlie looks around the shattered cabin. His wounded brothers lie silent or groaning on the floor. The plane is little more than a flying skeleton, but what chills his blood the most is the realization that they are now drifting slowly at an incredibly low altitude, directly over a massive German anti-aircraft base. On the ground below, German soldiers manning flak guns and Luftwaffe ground crews refueling fighters freeze in their tracks. They stare in absolute, dumbfounded disbelief as this battered American bomber drifts like a colossal metallic ghost right over their heads. Standing among these awestruck witnesses is a man named Franz Stigler, an elite Luftwaffe pilot. 28-year-old Franz, possessing the sharp eyes of a hunting falcon, is standing beside his beautifully engineered F-109. F-9 fighter. He is not just any pilot, he is a precision instrument of war. He has flown an astonishing 487 combat missions, has been shot down 17 times himself, and his body is covered in the scars of war. He needs only one more kill to secure his required combat score, earn an audience with the Führer, and have the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross placed around his neck. The moment he sees ye Olde Pub lumbering overhead, the blood of the ace hunter boils. Without a second's hesitation, he flicks away his cigarette and vaults into his cockpit with the agility of a panther. The Daimler-Benz engine erupts with a deafening roar, and his Bf-109 rockets into the sky like a silver spear, carrying the howl of death as it instantly closes the distance on the staggering American bomber. It is too easy. It is an absolute gift from the heavens. All he has to do is frame the massive silhouette in his gun sight, squeeze the trigger, and eternal glory is his. Franz expertly slides his fighter perfectly into the B-17's ruined rear blind spot. His thumb rests heavily on the red firing button of his cannons. His heart beats in rhythm with his engine. A flawless execution is seconds away. However, the execution never comes. Peering through his cold, precise Revi reflector gun sight, Franz does not see a steel fortress worthy of destruction. He sees a sight that instantly shatters his hardened, war-torn heart and rocks him to his very soul. This is not a combat-ready bomber, it is a flying graveyard barely clinging to the sky. More than half of the tail section has been blown away, flapping like a torn rag in the slipstream. The tail gunner's position is completely destroyed, and the young American gunner lies lifeless, draped over his weapon, his blood freezing into jagged, dark red icicles several feet long that hang like bloody swords in the freezing air. The left side of the fuselage is ripped entirely open, a cavernous, jagged wound exposing the bare ribs of the aircraft. Through this horrific chasm, Franz has a clear, agonizing view into the cabin young American boys, their faces smeared with blood, their flight suits shredded, frantically using trembling hands to bandage their dying brothers. Those young faces etched with absolute terror, profound despair, yet radiating an overpowering will to live slam directly into Franz's conscience. In that split-second, time stops. Franz Stigler's mind goes entirely blank, only to be filled by a deep, authoritative voice echoing through the smoke of his memories, ringing like a massive bell in his head. It is the voice of his most revered mentor, the chivalrous Commander Gustav Rodel from his days fighting in the North African desert, delivering a fierce pre-battle warning. Listen to me, boys. You are fighter pilots first, last, and always. You are men of honor, not butchers. If I ever hear of any one of you shooting at an enemy who is bailing out in a parachute, or an enemy who has lost the ability to defend himself, you won't face a court-martial. I will draw my own sidearm and shoot you myself. Rodel taught them that while war is inherently ruthless and deadly, humanity must draw a line. Even in the darkest, bloodiest slaughterhouses of war, a soldier must retain his knightly honor. You do not massacre the defenseless. You do not murder a beaten foe. For Franz, sitting with his thumb hovering over the firing button, this crippled bomber is no longer a legitimate target. It is for all intents and purposes a slowly descending parachute. To open fire on a crew of wounded men struggling to survive would not be an act of war for his nation, nor military glory. It would be a cold-blooded, cowardly massacre. It would be murder, and in the vocabulary of a true fighter pilot who values honor above his own life, the word murder simply does not exist. It is a brutally dangerous choice. Franz knows exactly what is at stake. If he lets this enemy plane go and is spotted by the anti-aircraft crews below or reported to the Highcom and for treason, he will not just be stripped of his rank. He will be relentlessly hunted, tied to a wooden post, and face the cold barrels of a firing squad. No trial, no defense, only a shameful, agonizing death. He is gambling his own life for the lives of his enemies. Yet, looking at those desperate eyes, Franz makes the decision that will forever alter the trajectory of their lives. He takes his thumb off the trigger. Slowly, gently, he pushes the throttle forward, easing his feared Bf-109 fighter smoothly, alongside the shredded left wing of Olde Pub. The two aircraft are so incredibly close that Franz can clearly see the scratches on the American pilot's leather helmet. Their wingtips are mere feet from colliding in the turbulent air. Inside the cockpit, Charlie Brown, hovering between semi-consciousness and sheer terror, turns his head. Out of the corner of his eye, he catches a dark shadow and the blood in his veins turns to ice. A German fighter sporting a massive black cross is hovering like a phantom a mere 15 feet away. Charlie's pupils dilate violently, his heart nearly stops. He screams into his intercom, ordering the top turret gunner to train their only functioning .50 caliber machine gun directly on the German pilot's head. But he issues a strict command, and do not fire unless I give the word. Charlie's brain is spinning in chaos, completely unable to process this absurd reality. Is this a sadistic psychological game the Germans play? Is he admiring his prey before the kill? Or is he using his radio to call in the rest of the wolf pack to finish them off? This has to be a deadly trap. As Charlie's nerves stretch to the breaking point, the situation becomes even more surreal. Through the thin, freezing layer of air separating the two planes, Charlie watches the German pilot begin gesturing wildly from his cockpit. Franz points emphatically down at the German countryside, the dark forests and snow-covered fields. He mouths exaggerated words, signaling Charlie to drop his landing gear, land at a German airfield, and surrender. Franz knows this is their only chance. If they crash land, they will live and get medical care from German doctors. But to Charlie, surrender is impossible. He stares back at the German and shakes his head with fierce stubbornness. Franz grows frantic, pointing far to the north toward Sweden. If they fly there, they will be safe from the carnage. Yet Charlie shakes his head again. He points with resolve toward the west, toward England, 250 miles away. Looking at this young opponent, Franz can only offer a tragic smile. He knows how utterly suicidal this fantasy is. To traverse the North Sea on dying engines is a pipe dream. If the engines fail, they will be swallowed by the waves. Franz knows a darker truth before they cross the coast. The Atlantic wall will shred their low-flying bomber to pieces. If God put you in my path, and I chose to spare you, I will see this through. The ace commits to a dangerous action. He doesn't peel away. Instead, he tucks his fighter tight against the wing, maintaining a gap of fewer than 20 feet. He uses BFONEHUND, REDA, and EAM markings to create an illusion. He pretends to escort a captured American bomber. It is a suicidal bluff. Below, flak gunners hesitate seeing their own fighter. They lower their 88 barrels. Under his protection, the miracle continues. He escorts the bleeding crew over treetops, right through the air defenses. When only waves remain below them, Franz looks at his fuel gauge. The red light is flashing. He can go no further. This is the limit of his protection. If he continues, he will run out of fuel and plunge into the freezing depths. The two aircraft, representing opposing nations, fly side by side one last time in the gray void where the sky meets the sea. Franz pulls his fighter away. Looking through his frost-covered canopy, he locks eyes with the determined American captain. In that fleeting second, they are no longer sworn enemies, but fellow warriors fighting against death in the unforgiving sky. Franz raises his right hand and delivers a crisp military salute, a gesture of chivalry and respect for a brave adversary. With a final look at the bomber, he banks his BFONEAND, RED, and INE and carves a decisive arc through the gloomy clouds. Charlie Brown stares through his shattered window at the fighter as it shrinks into a black speck with profound amazement. That enemy salute is seared into his soul like a brand, but he has no time to dwell on this bizarre act of grace right now. He must summon every ounce of his willpower and strength to bring his dying brothers home across the freezing dark ocean. The journey across the North Sea is an eternity as the crippled ship bucks in the storm like a dead leaf about to be torn. Through superhuman piloting and a stroke of luck, the plane crosses the vast ocean and levels out over a strip in England. The moment the heavy wheels hit the cold concrete, at a high speed the severely weakened landing gear collapses instantly. The belly of the bomber grinds against the runway, erupting in a shower of sparks and the screech of tearing aluminum skin. The aircraft spins and slides for an eternity before finally shuddering to a halt in a thick cloud of smoke and dry dust. Charlie did it as he kept his promise by dragging 8 breathing brothers out of the depths of hell and brought them home. However, the story does not end with a hero welcome as commanding officers turn pale and issue a high-level gag order fast. No crew member is allowed to utter a single word about this to anyone under threat of a court-martial for treason in any place. The military brass is terrified that if the story of a humane, honorable German pilot spreads, it will shatter the troops' perception. They fear this would severely undermine the fighting morale of the Allied forces. Meanwhile, faraway Franz Stigler also remains silent. At a battered German airbase, he keeps his secret about his missing fuel and unfired ammunition buried deep within his own heart. He knows that if the Gestapo ever catches wind of his treason, compassion, a cold, brutal hangman's noose awaits his arrival. So too, men sharing a massive life-altering secret continue down their vastly different turbulent paths for the rest of the war. After the conflict, Charlie Brown returns to America carrying the physical and emotional scars of battle across the dark sea. He takes off his uniform, goes to college, and seeks peace in books, trying to forget the terrifying roar of the powerful engines. Later, he is called back to serve as an intelligence officer for the U.S. Air Force, living a quiet life before retiring to Florida. Franz Stigler's post-war life is an epic of hardship, as defeated Germany is a landscape of ruins and many shattered dreams. As a former Luftwaffe ace, he is stripped of his pride and struggles, simply to survive in the cold ashes of his broken country. Seeking a new beginning, he takes his wife in 1953 and emigrates to the freezing wilderness of Vancouver, Canada. Starting as a laborer in a logging camp, Franz uses here willpower and German meticulousness to build a heavy machinery firm. Decades slip away like water through fingers, and more than 40 years pass in silence as the world changes around the men. Yet in the aging heart of Charlie Brown, the image of that German pilot never fades, growing sharper with the passage of time. In nightmares, he wakes in cold sweat in that sky, seeing the German officer saluting him through the shattered cockpit glass. Who was that man? What was his name? Why did he risk the firing squad to let them live? Did he survive that meat-minus grinder war? The year is 1986. At a private reunion of veterans, someone asked Charlie to recount his most terrifying mission. Unable to suppress the weight in his heart, he breaks his 43-year vow of silence and speaks of that freezing winter sky. With tears streaming down his face, he tells the story that the military had locked away in dark filing cabinets for decades. Charlie makes a vow to find the German pilot who gave him a second chance at life before he dies, just to say thank you. He begins a long crusade, writing to military archives in the United States and Germany, scouring tons of declassified documents. He places ads in many newspapers but finds nothing, as the mysterious pilot seems to have vanished from the face of the earth. In 1990, a nearly defeated Charlie places a heartfelt ad in a newsletter for former Luftwaffe pilots called Jaeger Blatt. He describes the events of December 20th, 1943, and leaves his American address and phone number below. Weeks later, on a bright afternoon, an unassuming envelope with a Canadian stamp arrives in the mailbox of Charlie Brown. With trembling hands, Charlie tears it open to find a sheet of paper with the words, "I am the one you have been looking for." Franz Stigler recalls the damage to the Olde Pub, the bloody icicles on the tail end, his own hand gestures pointing toward Sweden. Reading details that only the man in that cockpit could possibly know, Charlie Brown's eyes instantly flood with tears. He grabs the phone and calls the number in the letter as a raspy, powerful voice with a heavy German accent answers. "Is this the pilot of the BF? ONEHUND, or EDI and E?" Charlie asks, his voice trembling as he breaks his 47-year silence. "I am Franz," the voice replies with a heavy accent. I have thought of you and your brave crew every day for 47 years. In 1990, the two men finally meet in person at a quiet hotel in Seattle for an emotional and powerful reunion. When they see each other across the lobby, they stop frozen for a long second, as if the ghosts of the past are watching. Charlie steps forward, first his eyes flooding with tears as he throws his arms around the man who once spared his young life. Franz holds him just as tightly and whispers, in a raspy voice, "I am so glad you made it home to your family, Charlie." For the next few days they sit together for hours talking about that day and the strange ways that fate had bound them. Charlie finally asks the question, "Why did you do it? Why did you let us go when you had the perfect shot at my bomber?" Franz looks him in the eye and replies, "I could not shoot you. To me, you were no different than a man in a parachute." From that day on, they become like brothers, calling each other every week and visiting their families across the border. Their story is written in a best-selling book in 2008, touching the hearts of millions of people worldwide. The U.S. Air Force even conducts a months-long investigation confirming every single undeniable detail of the miracle. In 2008, as if orchestrated by God, these two blood brothers pass away peacefully within months of each other. Carrying their profound mutual respect and endless love, they soar forever into a pure, quiet sky, free of smoke and gunfire. They used an unfired trigger end, a solemn military salute to write the greatest immortal hymn to the redemption of the soul. In an era of hatred and madness, they chose mercy and honor to prove that humanity can survive the darkest abyss. In your strategy, observer, remember that even on the deadliest battlefield, the soul can always find its way home.